Sterling Karat Gold. First of all, thank you to Peninsula Press for sending a review copy. I've been a fan of Isabel Waidner as a writer for a while now. I started with their second novel, We Are Made of Diamond Stuff, which was published by Dostoevsky Wannabe, and it was shortlisted for the Goldsmiths Prize. I got to go to Goldsmiths University and watch them give a reading and a talk with the other shortlisted authors. It was really, really cool, and We Are Made of Diamond Stuff was a really fantastic novel. Isabel Waidner is a non-binary writer from Germany who resides in the UK, I believe in London, and they are fantastic. A really visionary kind of a writer who writes exquisite, subtle, surreal literary fiction. We Are Made of Diamond Stuff was a really impactful book that was only about 100 pages long and primarily dealt with institutionalized racism, xenophobia. It was a book that I felt like could only have come out of the Brexit zeitgeist of the UK at the time. It is a book about migration, it is a book about the working class, it is a book about Otherism, this idea of scapegoating other people. Within every single community, there is always this case of othering someone, of scapegoating the other, whoever they may be. And that's kind of what We Are Made of Diamond Stuff was about. And so it was a book about the queer community and all of the problems within it. It was a book about Britain and problems of classism, racism, xenophobia, etc. It did a lot with 100 pages. And now we have Sterling Karat Gold. This is Isabel Waidner's third book, this time published by Peninsula Press, and they've done it again. I haven't read their first novel, but I've seen other critics and other reviewers and other readers say that this is their best book. I certainly think it takes everything from We Are Made of Diamond Stuff and elevates it even further for a number of reasons. First off, Sterling Karat Gold is a loose remake of, or a book that is inspired by, Kafka's The Trial. I am a huge Franz Kafka fan. I adore his way of writing, his way of seeing the world. I find Kafka so earth-shatteringly funny in a completely unique way. I think a lot of people don't find Kafka funny. Like, even if you enjoy Kafka or you don't, finding him funny is still kind of a rarity. I find Kafka hysterical, and I have no idea if his books were supposed to be funny. If you don't know who Franz Kafka was, he was a Czech writer who had a very, very pathetic and depressing life. He worked a nothing job and had a terrible, terrible relationship with his abusive father. Those two things inspired pretty much everything that he wrote, and he was just a really sickly, pathetic little man, and he wrote two novels, neither of which were properly finished, and a huge slew of short stories which have been collected a dozen times into different collections. One of those stories is a very long letter that he wrote to his dad, which apparently his mum threw on the fire and his dad never read it. And then he wrote Metamorphosis, his most famous story, about a man who wakes up one day and is a bug. And what's so funny about this book is that Gregor Samsa, the guy who turns into a bug, his main priority, the fact that he's just turned into a beetle, or a cockroach, depending on the translation, his big concern is the fact that he's going to be late to work. That's what the Kafka-esque is all about as a literary style, as a philosophy, if you like. It's about absurdly looking at the bureaucratic nature of our society, picking it apart, and showing its arse, showing how ridiculous bureaucracy is and what it does to us as people and the way that it destroys us kind of from the inside out. And The Trial is a story about a man who is arrested and he doesn't know why, and he's put on trial and he hasn't done anything wrong, and he's trying to find out why, and nobody will tell him, and the story progresses and becomes more ridiculous as it goes. And it's fantastic because it certainly reflects a lot of ordinary life when things exist as rules and laws and the status quo when they don't need to. Sterling Karat Gold is a loose retelling of The Trial. I do recommend you read some Kafka and read The Trial before you read this. I think it'll really help your understanding. And I also think you should read We Are Made of Diamond Stuff as well. Anyway, all of that is to say that Sterling Karat Gold is a pretty incredible piece of literature. It is one of the smartest and most overwhelming novels in terms of its themes, its story, its characters, and most of all, the way that it is constructed that I've read in so long. It's really remarkable. Sterling Karat Gold begins with the titular Sterling, who suddenly finds themselves being attacked by bullfighters in Camden. They are overwhelmed by football hooligans and matadors and people attacking them, and they don't really understand why. And then later they go to see a friend of theirs and try to explain the situation, and it doesn't really make any sense. And then it starts to become more clearly connected to the trial when this incident with these matadors and bullfighters suddenly comes to bite them in the arse when Sterling is at a football game and two kind of police security guard people come up to them and say, you need to be put on trial for the thing that you just did where you instigated a fight with these bullfighters. It's very, very trippy. And from there, it gets even stranger. It involves time travel, but the time travel only moves from the future backwards. It involves spaceships. The trial takes place in Sterling's own bathroom in their flat, and there are stuffed toys that they are supposed to have trodden on that were an endangered species. It's very difficult to talk about, honestly. Sterling Karat Gold is a very overwhelming book in terms of how surreal it is, and I think it's a really good example of how you just need to read a thing. If you feel overwhelmed and you don't understand what's going on and that puts you off, just keep going. And when I say just keep going, I don't mean that it's going to make more sense as it goes, but rather you will ingest and digest as much as you need to in order to make sense of it in your own way. You need to put in a little bit of work with this book. It is fiercely intelligent. At times I felt like it was far, far smarter than I am. And Isabel Waidner really is a kind of visionary writer. But the book, once again, like We Are Made of Diamond Stuff, it is about Otherism. It is about scapegoating. It is about xenophobia. It is about transphobia. It is about homophobia. It is about the state of the UK as a fascist nation right now. The thing about Kafka's The Trial is that it was looking at bureaucracy and nonsense political systems of its time that are still relevant today to tell a very trippy and kind of funny narrative. And Sterling Karat Gold is doing the exact same thing here, but it's more relevant to a post-Brexit Tory Britain where violence is on the rise, crime is on the rise, homelessness is on the rise, and we're increasingly living in a transphobic, homophobic nation. It's a really scary time to be someone who isn't a straight, cisgender, white Tory voter. It's a terrifying place. And Isabel Waidner is using a Kafka-Esque narrative structure and an incredible amount of surrealism and lots of really complex metaphors to paint a ridiculous picture of post-Brexit Tory fascist Britain. It's incredible. I just think a lot of people are going to be very, very turned off by how surreal it is. At any given time, on any given page, you might feel like giving up because it doesn't make sense, because there is so much surrealism and strangeness going on that is just pelted at you again and again. But I promise, sticking with it and approaching it from a more positive place really, really helps. If you are feeling overwhelmed by this book, do not let that put you off. Change your mindset. Change the way that you're approaching it. Don't let it beat you. And I felt like I was being beaten by it at certain times because I really try to analyze books. I really try to be on their side and deconstruct them and get as much out of them as I can. And at times I felt like I couldn't do that because it was too strange. But you got to change your attitude. You got to smile and go with it and enjoy it. Enjoy the nonsense. And that really helped. As someone who finds Kafka funny, I found that approaching this book with a kind of humorous, satirical angle, it really, really helped. Sterling Karat Gold is written in a really incredible way. And every chapter changes and twists a little bit in terms of its tone and its structure. And I really appreciated that. Like, it'll change from the past tense to the present tense, the third person to the first person. There is one chapter that is one single long paragraph with barely any sentence breaks, kind of like Duck's Newburyport. It's wild. And again, even through all of that dense, surrealist, almost nonsense, the book is dealing with incredibly deep, dark, serious themes of transphobia, of xenophobia, of living in an increasingly fascist and terrifying, hateful, aggressive, almost narcissistic Britain. It does all of that while being incredibly surreal, incredibly Kafkaesque, and incredibly satisfying. Isabel Waidner is a true visionary writer, and I really recommend Sterling Karat Gold, with the only caveat being that it is very, very strange and it can be overwhelming, but you need to stick with it and just enjoy the ride, even when it feels like it is a bit overwhelming. Just stay with it and enjoy it and take from it whatever you can. It's worth the ride. Cool. Check out Isabel Waidner. They are an amazing writer. Read their other stuff. Read some Kafka. Read this and subscribe for books.